Close your eyes for a moment. Think about the last anime villain who genuinely disturbed you. Not annoyed you, not bored you, disturbed you. Got one. Now ask yourself this. Why them? Why that character specifically? Was it their power? Their body count? Their twisted smile? Or was it something else? Something you couldn't quite name? A feeling that crawled under your skin and whispered, I understand this. I've felt this before. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never admit. The villains that truly terrify us aren't the ones who are nothing like us. They're the ones who are everything like us, just taken to a place we pray we'd never go. Today, we're not doing a simple villain ranking. We're performing psychological surgery. We're cutting open the minds of anime's most haunting antagonists and discovering why, buried beneath their monstrous actions, beats a heart that sounds eerily familiar. Are you ready to look in the mirror? Because I promise you, you might not like what's looking back. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that bell, because we go deep. Not surface level villain, bad analysis, but the kind that makes you pause the video and stare at your ceiling, questioning your existence. Today's exploration, the mirror and the monster, unmasking our shared anxieties. We'll examine characters like Shigaraki, Tamura Pain, Johann Liebert, and others not as villains to be defeated, but as psychological case studies that expose humanity's most primal fears. But first, let me ask you something that might seem strange. Have you ever caught yourself agreeing with a villain? Don't scroll away. Don't pretend. I'm asking you directly. Have you ever listened to an antagonist's monologue and thought, wait, they have a point? Maybe you pushed the thought away. Maybe you felt guilty. But it was there, wasn't it? See, here's what separates forgettable villains from legendary ones. Forgettable villains want power for power's sake. They're cartoons, caricatures. You defeat them, you move on. You forget their names by Tuesday. But legendary villains, they don't want destruction for fun. They want something painfully human: connection, recognition, justice, control over a world that made them feel powerless. And that's where it gets terrifying. Because those desires, they're not alien. They're not foreign. They're sitting inside you right now. The same fears, the same wounds, the same desperate needs. The only difference is degree. Let me prove it to you. Think about Shigaraki Tamura from My Hero Academia. When we first meet him, he's a man-child throwing tantrums, disintegrating people on a whim. Easy to dismiss, right? Just another angry villain. But then the layers peel back. We learn about Tenko Shimura, the little boy who just wanted someone to hold his hand, whose family rejected his dreams, whose quirk manifested in the most horrific way possible, destroying everyone he loved before he even understood what was happening. And then, when he reached out for help covered in his family's blood, traumatized beyond comprehension, society walked past him. Every single person looked away. Now, tell me something honestly. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever been in pain, reaching out, and felt like the world just kept walking? I'm not comparing your experiences to murder. That's not the point. The point is this: the seed is the same. The feeling of being abandoned when you needed help most. That's universal. Shigaraki became what happens when that seed grows in poisoned soil with no one to pull the weeds. Let's dig deeper into this, because abandonment is one of the most fundamental human fears. Psychologically, it's hardwired into us from infancy. We are born helpless. We need others to survive. Being left behind doesn't just hurt on a primal level, it signals death. This is why so many compelling villains share this wound. Look at Gaara from Naruto. Before his redemption, this was a child who was told he was loved, only to discover it was all obligation. His own uncle, the one person he believed cared, tried to assassinate him. The betrayal didn't just break his heart, it shattered his understanding of reality itself. His conclusion: I exist only for myself. I love only myself. Cold, absolutely, but irrational. When you trace the logic, when you understand the trauma, it becomes horrifyingly rational. If love has only ever been a weapon used against you, why would you ever seek it again? Now, here's where I need you to be honest with yourself. How many of your defense mechanisms, your walls, your distrust, your tendency to push people away before they can leave stem from similar wounds? Maybe not as dramatic, maybe not as violent in their expression, but the same logic. If I don't get close, I can't get hurt. If I need no one can abandon me. If I strike first, I control the pain. Sound familiar? Villains don't come from nowhere. They come from us. From the darkest what-ifs of our own psychology, given form and followed to their terrible conclusions. Let's shift to another fear that drives countless anime antagonists. The terror of powerlessness. Pain from Naruto understood something most heroes refuse to acknowledge. He looked at the world, the cycles of war, the endless suffering, the way nations crush individuals without a second thought, and he asked a question that still echoes. How can you call this peace? His solution was monstrous. Create a weapon so devastating that fear itself would enforce order. Mutually assured destruction as peace. It's insane, but wait. Isn't that exactly what our world did? Nuclear deterrence. The Cold War doctrine that prevented World War III through the promise of total annihilation. I'm not saying Pain was right. I'm saying his logic wasn't born from madness. It was born from observation. From witnessing suffering he couldn't prevent. From feeling the weight of powerlessness and deciding, never again. I will force a solution. Here's the psychological truth. Control is the antidote to trauma. When something terrible happens to you, something you couldn't stop, your brain becomes obsessed with prevention. You develop rituals, hypervigilance, the need to micromanage every variable, because if you can just control enough, maybe you'll never be hurt again. Villains like Pain, like Light Yagami from Death Note, like Yuan Yeager in his final form, they're all responses to powerlessness. They looked at chaos and said, I will impose order, by any means necessary. And here, the uncomfortable mirror. How often do you try to control things because uncertainty feels unbearable? How often does the anxiety of not knowing push you toward behaviors that hurt yourself or others? Light Yagami started with murderers and criminals. Just the worst of humanity, right? Justice. But control is addictive. The definition of evil expanded. The criteria loosened, until he was killing anyone who opposed him not because they were evil, but because they challenged his control. That escalation isn't fiction. That's documented psychology. The more power we have, the more we rationalize its use. The Stanford Prison Experiment. The Milgram Experiment. History itself. Villains show us the endpoint. They ask, if you had the power to remake the world according to your values, would you really resist? Now let's talk about the most existential terror of all, one that anime handles with devastating precision. The fear that you are nothing. Johann Liebert, from Monster, is often called the most terrifying anime villain ever created. And he never throws a punch. No superpowers, no armies, just words, manipulation, and an emptiness so profound, it makes people question whether existence itself has meaning. Johann isn't evil in the traditional sense. He's the absence of something. A void where a self should be. And he spreads that void to everyone he touches, leading people to suicide, murder, despair, not through force, but through revealing the nihilism he believes underlies everything. Here's a question I want you to actually sit with. Do you know who you are? Not your name, not your job, not your relationships. Who are you when all external validation is stripped away? When no one is watching? When every role you play is set aside? The fear of that question, of discovering nothing underneath the masks, drives more human behavior than we'll ever admit. We construct identities obsessively. We cling to labels. We rage when those identities are threatened, because somewhere, in the basement of our psyche, we're terrified that Johann might be right, that beneath all the performance, there might be nothing at all. Obito, Uchiha, felt this void after Rin's death. His identity was built around her, around protecting her. When she died, he didn't just lose a person, he lost himself. The Eye of the Moon plan wasn't really about peace. It was about escaping the unbearable reality that his sense of self had been destroyed. What's your Rin? What person, achievement, or role are you so attached to that, if it disappeared, you wouldn't know who you are anymore? That attachment isn't just love, it's also fear. Fear of the void. Villains fall into that void, and build empires of pain to fill it. What do you build? So here we are, at the edge of the mirror. We've examined abandonment, powerlessness, identity, dissolution, the psychological wounds that forge anime's greatest villains. But I haven't been entirely honest with you. I haven't asked the most important question. What separates you from them? Think about it. You have experienced rejection. You have felt powerless. You have questioned who you really are. These wounds aren't unique to fiction, they're the inheritance of being human. So why aren't you a villain? Is it because you're morally superior? I don't think so. That's a comforting lie we tell ourselves. The truth is more nuanced and far more fragile. You had something they didn't. Maybe it was one person who saw you when you felt invisible. One hand extended when you were falling. One moment of connection that convinced you the world wasn't entirely hostile. Shigaraki reached out and no one took his hand. All Might was too late. That's not a story about a monster, it's a tragedy of failed intervention. Gaara was saved by Naruto, someone who also had every reason to become a villain, but didn't. Because an old man named Iruka chose to see him as human. The line between hero and villain isn't about morality. It's about opportunity. About whether, in our darkest moment, someone offered lightened, whether we were in a position to take it. This isn't just anime philosophy. This is criminology. This is trauma research. This is the foundational understanding of rehabilitation over punishment. Villains aren't born, they're created. By circumstances. By failures. By societies that looked away. And if you understand that, truly internalize it, to stop seeing villains as other, you start seeing them as warnings, as alternate versions of yourself, from timelines where the help didn't come. So what do we do with this? First, stop consuming villain stories passively. Every well-written antagonist is a psychological case study. They're asking you to examine fears you've buried, desires you've suppressed, wounds you've never properly healed. Second, recognize the seeds in yourself, not with guilt, with awareness. When you feel the pull toward isolation, control, nihilism, acknowledge it, because consciousness is the first step toward choice. Third, be the hand someone reaches for. You might never know when your kindness interrupts someone's villain origin story, when your presence in a dark moment changes a trajectory. Shigaraki was failed by an entire city. But it only takes one person to save a Tenko. Anime villains haunt us not because they're monsters. They haunt us because they're mirrors. Distorted, darkened, cracked mirrors, but mirrors nonetheless. They show us what we could become if our worst fears consumed us. If our deepest wounds festered instead of healed. If nobody came when we called for help. And in that reflection, if we're brave enough to look, we find not just horror but compassion, understanding, and maybe, finally, a reason to be a little gentler with ourselves and everyone else stumbling through the dark. Thank you for watching something this heavy. If it made you think, really think, drop a comment. Tell me which villain mirrors your fears. Let's make this a conversation, not a lecture. Subscribe if you want more content that goes beneath the surface. Share this with someone who needs it. And remember, the monster in the story isn't just the villain. It's the fear of what we all could become. I'll see you in the next one.